It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is the Hyperspace
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome back, podcast pioneers, to the Hyperspace Podcasting in the 25th century, the interwebs' first and still only podcast. Welcome back, guys. My name is Matt.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
Oh, Season 2 kickoff.
Man, it's a little strange to be back here.
I'm sure people couldn't wait after the cliffhanger from the first season.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know about you guys, but on my tube hatch, I've been getting some pretty nasty notes.
On your tube hatch?
On the tube hatch.
I call that my zipper.
But, you know, whatever.
I've been getting some very strange glyphs from some 25th century protesters, I think.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's people out there. Apparently, they don't like what we're doing.
No, I think there's an underground movement to shut us down.
They don't like what we're talking about. And I don't understand
like change. They don't like change.
Maybe they just don't like cool stuff.
Maybe not. You know, they're happy walking around in their quasi-futuristic unitards.
I mean, other than our wives, who doesn't like cool stuff?
That's a great point.
Don't worry, they'll never listen to this. They'll never hear this. So
No,
yeah,
you're right. Oh, man.
So what's been going on, guys?
Well, you know, I got to tell you, the holidays in the 25th century is a strange thing. Because, you know, guys, the Great Calamity didn't just take out pop culture. It removed culture, period. And these poor people, like Matt was saying, some of my cubicle tube mates, they tried to put up like a little holiday display, and they were very confused. They had like these plastic replicas of Santa's reindeer, but they had them housed in the nativity stable. And they had the wise men doing battles with menorahs as weapons. They were a little confused. They're crossing a bunch of different traditions, and it was a little strange.
Well,
but they looked upon my Christmas tree that I had set up in my house with disdain and curiosity.
Well, they've been given a lot to throw at the fan. They just don't know what's what's sticking on the wall and what's not. So they're just throwing everything at it at once.
Yeah,
so.
It's really odd. But, you know, aside from that, I had a pretty good break. You know, I saw Rise of Skywalker 5 times in the theater. Watched the Mandalorian 2 more times all the way through. I watched it with my dad and also with my mother-in-law.
Nice. What'd your dad think?
He loved it. He's a big Star Wars fan anyway, so, you know, it's just like watching a big, long Star Wars movie.
I got caught up on a Netflix series that I wasn't expecting to watch, but I watched it anyway. It was The Witcher, of all things.
Okay, with Superman?
Yeah, with Superman, with Henry Cavill.
I've heard mixed things about that.
You know, I don't want to say it was good, but it wasn't bad either. It was just kind of like, I felt like it was a placeholder in my life. And I'm like, I'll just watch this.
I've seen it.
It had a couple laughs in it, but I think it's getting a lot of overhype. You know, I'm seeing a lot of memes on The Witcher, and I'm like, you know, it didn't quite deserve all these memes.
It seems like everyone is trying to make their own Game of Thrones, and I think that's what Netflix was hoping for.
Yeah, and it was obviously a much lower budget production than Game of Thrones, but I have to say it's also a lot more tongue-in-cheek, so it was kind of funny to watch, but it wasn't my favorite. I should have watched like Stranger Things 3 and catch up on that season instead.
See, I was disappointed with that one, but moving on.
Me and Matt have started Picard and enjoy it quite a bit.
Picard is awesome. I like the carnival one.
I have not got to that. What I've been doing is watching the James Bond movies. I finally decided to sit down.
That's what I should have been doing.
Started with Dr. No and went all the way through. I'm up to, I just finished Quantum of Solace.
Nice. Good to power through them.
So I got two left for the new one. And I have to say overall, even the not great ones have some value to them. That's worth watching. But there was one that I do think is just atrocious, and that was Pierce Brosnan's last one, Die Another Day. That was terrible.
Now, that one had Madonna and Halle Berry in it, right?
And you know what? But that's the problem. You put Madonna in a movie, and it's instantly a bad movie. So that was, I mean, they jinxed it from the beginning. Madonna's not in a good movie. So it's like they didn't want, it's like, well, I don't know, we want this to suck, so let's put Madonna in it. That's a guarantee.
So powering through the entire series like this, how did it go when it dipped into like the elder years of Roger Moore?
Oh, I like, A View to Kill's bad, but it's entertaining. Christopher Walken's really great. His death at the end is fantastic when he's hanging onto the wire, and it's clear he realizes he's going to die, and he starts laughing. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. This is hilarious, and I love that. I mean, no, it's not good, and he's definitely past his prime, but there's entertainment value in it. It's the same thing with Never Say Never Again. That movie is bad, but it's like if the production. Well, who was the guy that made the Batman TV show? What was his name? I can't remember his name now. It's like if he had produced a James Bond. When James Bond throws his own urine in a guy's face, I mean, come on. I mean, you have to laugh. It's just ridiculous. So so I actually enjoyed it for its badness.
Directed by Irving Kershner of Empire
Irving
Strikes
Kershner.
Back.
And the story behind it is funny because the guy who produced it had written Thunderball, and apparently he had plans to just every few years remake Thunderball. That was his plan. Like that was his only in for James Bond. So every few years he was going to remake Thunderball. So that finally the courts went, no, you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, and that just happened like not too many years ago too.
But that's kind of funny too. But overall, I've been, it's not my favorite franchise. I will say that I had never seen Quantum of Solace before. I had seen Casino Royale, and I liked Casino Royale much more the second time. Mm-hmm. And I actually liked Daniel Craig's Bond more. I didn't really warm up to him at first. But I like they show his character evolve from kind of this reckless agent to someone who becomes more Bond-like.
Jared, you and I saw Casino Royale in the theater.
Yeah, we saw both that and Quantum of Solace.
And I love Casino Royale. It's one of my favorite Bond movies.
Yeah, it is.
I think they did a real, they did a big character shift with these Bonds and the previous ones. I think, it's much more Jason Bourne.
Who I really like in those movies is what's the actress' name that plays M?
Oh,
Judi
God.
Dench.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's great.
She's even better in the Craig movies, I think.
I agree. She's great.
Because she's like a great counter to him. But
so you're coming up on Skyfall, right?
Yeah, which I've heard is like one of the best ones.
That's so far the masterpiece of the Craig years, as far as I'm concerned.
I like Casino Royale was much more run and gun, but for a full movie experience, I think Skyfall's fantastic. Skyfall makes up for where Quantum of Solace kind of dragged its heels a lot. Skyfall just goes from the beginning.
Me and Matt we enjoyed the villain in Quantum of Solace quite a bit because he was just a weird little toad man.
Roman Polanski looking.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while, but I do recall thinking, me and Matt were both remarking, man, this dude is a complete
he's
weirdo.
really weird. But yeah, see, I'd heard other people say Quantum of Solace wasn't that strong, but I have to admit, I liked it. I enjoyed it all the way through. And I thought there was some great jokes in it. I was like laughing through it.
I would love to watch them like you did, like back to back. Even just the Craig movies, I'd like to watch back to back, power through them because spacing them out, I think I had time to be too judgmental about them, but to see them close up with each other, I'm sure I'd enjoy them together much more.
Well, I watched Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace on the same day.
Because it's essentially this part of the same movie.
But I didn't know that. I just happened to have some extra time, and I popped it in. I was like, oh, that's the guy from the end of the first one.
Yeah, it's one of the only James Bond films that's a direct sequel to the one before it.
Yeah. You know, my only complaint with Casino Royale was it didn't have a real car chase. They hinted at one, but it ended within like 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
with
the Aston Martin.
They destroyed that
and you know that, and there was a man in that car. Can you believe that? Can you believe that?
I mean, it's a great crash, but I would have liked that crash maybe 3 minutes down the road because
and then
I was really looking forward to a James Bond
his
car chase.
testicles beat with in a horrific.
Oh my gosh, that scene is amazing. I love too where he's laughing. He goes, "Gee, it's gonna be funny." Is right before you died scratching my balls.
But you know, talking about Casino Royale and then going into Quantum of Solace plays in very well with what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yes.
Actually,
Sequels.
because today it's all about sequels. The good, the bad, the okay. What makes a good sequel? What makes a bad sequel? So we're going to be talking about that a little later. But hey, guys, I think before we get into the meat of it, we should tell them some news.
News from the interwebs.
It was recently announced that Disney will be releasing all of the Star Wars films on 4K disc, in addition to the initial release of The Rise of Skywalker on March 31st. This means each movie, starting with Episode 1 all the way through Episode 9, will have a 4K disc release, in addition to numerous extras. On March 31st, a box set of all of the Skywalker saga films, that's Episodes 1 through 9, will be released. Each film will also, in addition to the 4K disc, get a Blu-ray and an additional Blu-ray that is filled with extra features. This sounded very interesting to me. In 2011, of course, they released 1 through 6 on Blu-ray. But it looks like, just at first glance, a lot of the stuff coming on this box set, it's going to be a mixture of old features and new stuff. So
I can't wait to spend more money.
No, you won't spend. See, Matt, we all know you're a poo-pooer of physical media these days.
Yeah, I don't really care about it, but I'm considering this purchase. I'm considering it. I don't really care about physical media anymore. I'm so into the streaming digital world. I don't really care.
Well,
I threw out so many DVDs and Blu-rays. It just didn't matter to me. It didn't matter.
Well, so Mike, since Matt has lost his dang fool mind and will be in the Stone Ages when a power outage hits or he loses internet, me and Mike still do buy physical media. And this box set, how do you feel about it, Mike? Because I feel slightly trepidatious.
I have to be honest with you. I don't see myself buying it right away. It's like sort of like fatigue. I've bought Star Wars so many times on, VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, and it's just sort of like I'm definitely not going to be buying it on the day it comes out. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I have a birthday in March, as I believe Mike does as well. I have told my family and the people who usually buy me gifts that they can just get me a Best Buy gift card, and I think I will be picking up the exclusive Best Buy box set, because currently the only place you can get the 9-film box set is Best Buy. It's Best Buy in the States, and it's Amazon UK overseas. They are exclusive to them. Otherwise, they're just releasing each film individually in a 3-disc collection. That way people can pick and choose, if they don't like the prequels or some of the sequels, they don't have to get the whole shot.
Yeah, I think I'll pick it up, but I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to start showing these movies to my son within the next year or two, when he's 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah,
and
a good
I think
age.
that's the way I'll do it. I'll probably pick that up and start showing it that way. But yeah, I'm not jumping on any physical media just yet.
So yeah, I think taking a look at these specs, and by the way, you can get a full, very detailed rundown on thedigitalbits.com. I think I'm gonna.
.com.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna jump in and grab this with the help of some Best Buy gift cards.
All right. Well, once you get it, you can come back on here and just give us a quick 5 minutes of what you think of what they offer.
Absolutely.
I'm curious if it's really earth-shattering, groundbreaking stuff that we've never heard about Star Wars before. I don't know what kind of extra features they're going to add in, but hey,
Yeah,
maybe there's something new.
we will see.
But, before we go on, I think we should get a little random. What do you think?
Random access memory. Let's go.
Random access memory.
All right, guys, I've got a random thought for you. I saw a few months back on the news a camera in the Northwest, like a standard road camera, caught a mysterious image of what some think was Bigfoot. So my random thought is, when you guys were kids, obviously the Bigfoot kind of myth was out there, but did you guys believe in any of these myths out there? Was there something that you really wanted to be true?
Well, I think when you're a kid, you'll believe anything. Some kid on the playground will tell you about Bigfoot, and you go home, and you're like, Bigfoot exists. So you're kind of a sucker when you're a kid.
Well, I will say I was totally fascinated with Bigfoot, in middle school. I would go to the library and check out the books, of which there were many. And I would, there were occasionally these weird little, I don't know, documentary videos at the video store that I would rent, and they'd be documentaries on Bigfoot. And there was one that I checked out, and I can't remember what it's called. It actually, of course, was revealed.
$6 Million Man episode.
No. This was a quote unquote documentary, but and it's on YouTube, because I remember finding it a few years ago, and it has since been debunked as of course, fake. But it was this almost totally legit documentary of this guy, and he had found a family of Bigfoot. It was up in Alaska in the Pacific Northwest.
Was John Lithgow in this?
No, he was not. But it was presented sort of like a National Geographic type of thing, and it legitimately freaked me out. And I was like, oh man, that's so frightening. But
this is middle school?
Yeah, this is middle school. I mean, it just weirded me out, the footage of these, giant people in ape suits walking around in the forest. And even in the video, there were bears around that were kind of looking at them. But I got to find what this video is and share it, because it was so, but I totally bought it hook, line, and sinker. But, of course, my dreams were crushed not too long ago, actually, when it was, completely debunked. And the guys, of course, were just shooting it with guys in ape suits and stuff.
Yeah.
But it totally, the whole Bigfoot thing in the mid-'80s, I was all in. I was hooked.
Yeah, there was a lot of Bigfoot stuff going on in the 80s. There's a lot of shows that would talk about Bigfoot.
Harry and the Hendersons, as you mentioned.
Harry and the Hendersons came out. It was very popular. Mike, nothing?
I'm trying to think. I guess.
What about Loch Ness?
Is it just Bigfoot, or is there some urban legend? That...
Well, yeah, you can go full Fox Mulder. Saying, pick your.
I don't. Gosh, I think Really, when I was a kid, the thing I was terrified of was vampires.
Which
I saw-
obviously,
I saw Salem's Lot when I was a kid. And man, I was like, we had a basement. It was like dark and dingy, and
The kid
was,
scratching on the window.
And you know what else got me when I was a kid? What was it called? Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Oh, that was terrifying.
With the girl Miri from Star Trek was in it.
That was terrifying.
And they
Where the little
grabbed her
things
and
wanted the
drug her
teeth.
down the stairs. Man, that thing haunted me. I mean, I saw those things. Like I imagined those things were all in my room, and they were like different sizes, like full sized.
If anybody hasn't seen Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, it was what, in 1980 maybe? 81?
I think it was earlier
maybe
than
78.
that.
I don't know. Maybe late 70s. It's about these little creatures that live in a house. I think in the furnace. I think
They did
somewhere.
a remake, but it wasn't as good. Obviously.
No, the remake was awful. And these things ate teeth. They wanted your teeth.
Remember when they were dragging her down the stairs and she grabbed the camera and she started taking their pictures?
Yeah,
She was using the flash on them, and
So-
that image of them coming towards her with their hands outstretched. Oh my gosh!
I saw this. I remember I saw that when I was a little kid on vacation in the Jersey Shore, and this is what my parents were all watching this for some reason. And the end. Look, I'm going to spoil it for you. I'm sorry, but at the end, the girl is about to escape from the house, and then they drag her back in, and that's how it ends.
Yeah, they get her.
That's how it ends. And then dude, the end. And I remember looking at my parents. I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, good night.
That movie horrified me.
That was terrifying. Oh man. We digress. But yeah, we
So-
should have covered that one in the horror episode, but that was terrifying.
Anyway, that was it. I don't know if I ever bought into like Bigfoot and Loch Ness and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
apparently your parents let you watch a bunch of terrible stuff, though.
what about you, Matt?
Me? I didn't believe any of this crap.
It's too sophisticated.
No, I think I was really into Loch Ness as a kid. I was just fascinated by Loch Ness. Maybe I think it was coming off, the Land of the Lost with dinosaurs, and then there was this possibility of a dinosaur over in Scotland. And like I used to do what Jared did. I used to read books on Loch Ness. I used to watch all those like 1960s documentaries on like, PBS or whatever that would come on about Loch Ness, and you're like, man, they're gonna find him. And even now, I'll admit, every now and then you'll hear about like an expedition that they're going to like drag a new sonar buoy across the bottom of the lake, and I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe.
Well, with the
maybe there'll be
technology
something.
available today, and like you said, like there's cameras everywhere. It seems like something would have been uncovered by now.
I agree, of course.
You should
Now-
watch the Werner Herzog movie. He made a faux documentary about looking for the Loch Ness Monster, starring himself. So you like Werner Herzog. You like Loch Ness
do.
Monster. This
I
movie
do.
was made for you. So
I must watch that movie.
you should-
Okay.
I can't remember what it's called right this second.
I found the offending documentary from my youth and sent it to you guys. The Legend
nice.
of Bigfoot, 1976.
Oh, well,
Just-
that's high quality.
Just scroll through it. Like towards the end is when he's in the woods with the men in ape suits.
Then a movement in the woods. The sun hadn't come up yet. It was hard to make out what I'd seen at first. There he was. Bigfoot, standing no more than 100 yards from my blind. I began to shake all over. I could barely keep hold of my camera. He was awesome.
Watching it now, I even got chills in my back.
It's a good thumbnail they got. Oh
Yeah.
man. But yeah, all those little urban legends and myths. Deep down as a kid, you always kind of wanted something to be true. But
Well, yeah.
but big stuff like Bigfoot always kind of fascinated me, and we know people that are really into this stuff to this day, and I don't get it, but I guess you got to believe in something. It's funny. The internet is an interesting, new medium for people. Generationally, it's still really new, And it's created some interesting urban legends itself, like Slender Man is a good example. And like what people have done with like that myth and how that's propagated out there is fascinating to me. And, you know, that's become its own little weird Bigfoot with kids in a way too. So it's interesting to see as technology advances, you know, that primal kind of, you know, have to make up something scary of the dark thing still persists. It just finds new ways of getting out there.
I sent a screen grab of a scene that haunted my dreams for ages. This is a juvenile Sasquatch on a riverbank.
All right, well, but what is this?
I don't know. Mine's not showing.
Oh god, this looks like someone either with a backpack or like a heavy metal rocker who's taking a piss by a creek.
When it's in motion, it's quite unsettling.
Oh yeah,
I guess
that looks real.
Shut up.
We see from 100 feet away, this black figure is clearly
Listen,
a Bigfoot.
I was 11. Shut up. It was horrific.
I'll post it.
I believe
I'll
in
post
Bigfoot
it.
now after seeing that.
There he was, a young Bigfoot, frozen like a tree. We raced back to the river, but he slipped away. Seeing the young Bigfoot confirmed my theory. I could now roughly predict the creature's movements.
Shut up. Maybe we should talk about sequels now.
I think I'm speaking for both of us. Sequels and remakes are the bane of a film critic's existence.
I'll go along with that.
We want originality in the movies, but increasingly, Hollywood has given us the same boring old thing. Part 2.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
Luke Skywalker and Han Solo rescued the princess, destroyed the Death Star, but their story didn't end there.
You're going down.
The most electrifying rematch in motion picture history. Rocky II.
Join us on this, the final voyage of the Starship Enterprise. Star Trek III, The Search for Spock.
From Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
A Robert Zemeckis film. Back to the Future. Part 2.
Avengers!
Assemble.
All right, so when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, the sequel was already a big part of the movie-going experience. But what we'd like to talk about on this show is what makes a good sequel, what makes a terrible sequel, what makes a sequel that can potentially ruin the movies that came before it. And what are the different variations of sequels? Because all sequels are just not sequels.
It's true, very true.
So we're going to dig kind of deep into that, talk about some of our favorite sequels, and see where it goes.
What's the DNA of a good sequel, do you think? What does it have to have? There's a lot of different types, but what does it have to have?
I think a good sequel is obviously usually a continuation of the previous story in some fashion.
Sure.
I think in a good sequel, I start to feel like comfortable and at home early on. Like
there's good, easy connective tissue
it's
there.
It's like, oh yes, right. Okay, I remember why I enjoy these characters. It brings back the good feelings of the original film. The familiarity is comforting, I think.
Yes. I think it has to take the characters from the first film and the ensemble and the energy they generated and multiply that in the second one. They have to take the characters as a whole and build them and build their ensemble even more. And I don't mean add characters, but they have to build that rapport even more and not tear it apart.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, I think right there you've kind of hit on what makes a bad sequel is when you take what's happened before and you completely tear it down in the second one. I think it's very rarely that they've ever done that and you're like, oh, that's awesome. I love that. You know, it's like, because, you know, and I think a good example of that would be Alien 3. Because through the whole movie, you invest in these characters, and then you know, it was a stupid bonehead studio decision. It didn't have anything to do with creativity. You know, they just killed off the two characters. So it makes the whole point of the aliens pointless. It's like, because when the movie ends and she puts Newt down to sleep, and you're thinking, if you've seen the sequel, you're like, well, you're going to die anyway. What's the point?
Exactly.
So, you know, and I didn't see the new Terminator, but apparently they did that very thing
to John Connor.
John Connor.
Right, exactly. That's
they
a great
offed
example.
him, and that's stupid. That's because, you know, you like the characters, you want them to succeed, and when in the sequel, you want to see them, you know, what they do next. And
let's really get it going with, I think, a no-brainer, and this is a neat kind of sequel because it was kind of an unexpected sequel. There was no direct cliffhanger, and I'm going to use Empire Strikes Back as an example. Star Wars ended with a pretty good definitive end. It didn't leave anything with a cliffhanger. It didn't really leave things too open-ended. It tied it up pretty well. And Empire came out and took the story to the next level, took those great characters and built them up even more, and took the story to all new places. But it wasn't an expected sequel. They didn't lead you into it. It just was a gift.
Yeah, I remember when I found Empire was coming out, I was totally surprised. Because when Star Wars ended, I didn't have any thought that they would be making another one. Of course, I was 5 years old.
Yeah, it's probably something to do with your age at that point. But I mean, Empire was the first one that I saw.
But it did feel final. The end of Star Wars did feel final.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's why Empire was such a welcome sight, because you didn't expect it you didn't expect any more Star Wars, and when you heard about it or when it came out, for a lot of people older than Jared and I, because we were too young to appreciate that gap of Star Wars, but it really came to a surprise for people. So that was a really excellent sequel, which took the same characters that you loved and built on them, and took the same story that fascinated you and took it to a whole new level, showed you brand new things, but still kept the characters at the center point and made them important. And I think that's really the success story for Empire, is that it took those characters and really, really focused on them in brand new situations, and it worked really well.
I think another good example of that are the Star Trek movies. Because, I mean, the motion picture is kind of a standalone, but when you get to 2, 3, and 4, I mean, that's a serial. That's a straight up continuation, of all of those characters, and those characters evolve in those movies. You know, Spock loses himself. Kirk loses
right.
His son and his ship, so that's kind of goes in the same vein of a continuation.
Yeah, and Star Trek 2 was a standalone, unexpected sequel, which started a brand new storyline. But then, to your point, all the succeeding movies after that all kind of gelled together and carried the storyline forward. And that was fantastic. And it was all well done. It was all character-based.
And even 6. I mean, 5 was kind of 5 was kind of like
it dipped out
an
a bit.
episode.
Yeah.
But 6 picked up. You know, when you got to 6, you felt like, and this can kind of lead to what makes a bad sequel. Is a bad sequel to me is a movie that sort of just ignores what happens, and it's sort of. But you know, at that time, movies were made. It was like one and done. You know, you didn't have home video. You know, so if you saw a movie in a theater, that was, you know, the sequel came out. Chances are you saw the movie 3 years ago and you don't remember anything about it. But it is disappointing when you see the sequel and it sort of ignores everything, or if it takes a character and it kind of reboots them back to where they were in the first movie. And I think an example of that is Ghostbusters 2, when they reboot Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver's characters to recreate that dynamic they had in the first movie. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, where they had a falling out,
and then they had to do that whole you know, getting into a relationship again. I thought that was a major cheat in that movie.
I'm not gonna lie, I love Ghostbusters too.
No, I like it, but I just think that's a cheat. I think that's a big cheat.
I get you. I got it. You know, it's funny when you're talking to when you lay out Star Trek, how you just did. You know, it's funny. We talk a lot about Star Wars in this podcast. We don't get too much into Star Trek, which I'm sure we will later. But you know, when you watch the original series and then you watch the movies, the complete picture of that universe that they've given us is amazing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the cohesion of those movies and the foundation of that TV show, I don't think there's anything in science fiction or fiction for that matter that really can compare to what Star Trek, that whole universe has been fleshed out.
Well, I think the characters, because I love Star Wars, but I think the characters in Star Trek are better characters, if that makes, I'm not. Does that make
more relatable people?
Yeah, they're like humans. They're like,
because they are. I mean, it's like us, but in the future.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. You can relate to them.
Yes. They're not living in some mystical galaxy,
right?
Fighting with the Force. It's a relatable.
There's
thing.
a few more steps closer than Star Wars, to be sure. But it's a great universe, and those movies, too. The success of how they wrote them and how they sequenced them together was really impressive. And it's a heck of a universe.
Star Trek did something there that has always fascinated me in movie sequels. In that 3 starts right after 2.
Yeah, right.
And then And it's the same with, you go back to the Rocky films. The first scene of Rocky 2 is a replay of the fight in Rocky 1. And then right after that, it's them in the hospital after the fight.
Mm-hmm.
It picks up exactly. And that's always fascinated me because sometimes, as I got older, I was like, I would kind of invent in my head where these characters go right after their movie. But then when the movie presents to you, oh, no, this picks up, 2 seconds after that last movie ended. And you kind of get that story straight away like that. That's always kind of fascinated me.
Well, the interesting about Rocky 1 and 2 is Rocky was written as a standalone movie, and they didn't decide to do the sequel until the success of the first one. But those 2 movies are like one movie, and they work. His arc in those 2 movies is fantastic because he loses the fight in the first one, but it's satisfying in that movie. But then in the second one, he gets a chance to win, and then that ending is satisfying. But those 2 movies work together, and it's funny because those 2 movies were not written together. 2 was written after the fact.
But it feels like one movie if you were to just watch them and and skip the end credits. You go right into the next one. I mean, because you're in the same sort of time period. It's still the late 70s. Everybody pretty much looks the same, and it's very cohesive. And that's a good example of a movie that kind of, you can argue later on the Rocky movies turned into something totally different, but
a little more commercialized.
A comic book.
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw a series out there that people will debate whether or not the sequels are good, but The Matrix. The Matrix.
We're watching
the original
that right
Matrix.
Now. Me and my wife are watching that right now. Actually, that's kind of funny.
You should be on the podcast right now. Tell your wife to wait.
All right,
you're getting on me about Bigfoot movies.
Not right this second, you knuckleheads.
So The Matrix, when it came out, and to this day, I still think was very smart. It was very original, and it was brilliant.
The first Matrix is the first. Yes, I agree 100%.
I mean, they pushed it on new effects. They had great writing. I thought it was a fun original science fiction story coming off of the 90s, which was replete with a lot of like suspense horrors and suspense dramas. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, the Silence of the Lambs. The whole 90s had a ton of those types of movies. And then towards the end, we started getting a little bit of sci-fi back, and The Matrix was a great example of really good sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
And
you know, when I saw that movie, I didn't even know it was sci-fi. I actually didn't even know what that movie was about. The only reason I saw that movie is because I heard it was really good.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I had no idea what it was about when I saw it.
And so when it starts getting into the whole robot stuff, I was like, what? What is this? What is going on?
It was very clever.
I remember the marketing was Lawrence Fishburne saying, I can't tell you what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. And that sort of fascinated me. Yeah,
and it's interesting they would market, because they would never market a movie like that.
No,
now
you have to.
They tell you the whole
out.
story. Yeah, the fact that they would play it so close to the vest and gamble on it like that people would come in to see it.
But the first Matrix is a perfect. To me, it's one of my favorite, just self-contained science fiction adventure films. You know,
yeah, I agree.
It from start to finish. That one movie is like just a perfect movie for me. But
yeah, I agree.
But it didn't stay that way for long.
Well, this is where I was getting at. You know, when you take characters that are well written and thoughtful, and you know they're clever and they're smart characters the way they're written, and then you move them and try to put them in a situation that is not exponentially bigger, but universally bigger than what they belong in, and the characters get diminished. And I felt that in Reloaded, the characters became just hollow shells of what they were in the first one, and it really became more about the action than it was about the story and the characters. And they were more impressed with what they could do than with what they should have been saying.
What the heck kind of story were they trying to tell? I mean,
it was so convoluted.
The first one was fairly complex but easy to follow. I mean, you knew what was happening. This, I mean, when Colonel Sanders comes on at the end of the movie for 15 minutes and spews nonsense, I was just I could not. I looked at my wife and was like, I can't believe what I'm watching. This is a turd.
Now, there were some impressive scenes in it. It was still a fun movie to watch. But as far as one of the great, to follow up on such an amazing, groundbreaking kind of movie, story and visually, to go to this, I thought it was quite a disappointment.
I think first of all, I like the sequels. I mean, I agree with everything you say about the first Matrix. As a standalone movie, and even when it ends, it feels like an ending. It doesn't feel like it needs a sequel. What they set up, I think it was one of those cases where they couldn't really pay off what maybe you could imagine. But also, I think the movies became because if you watch like the making of The Matrix, everyone talks about, oh, the Wachowskis are so smart and they're so well read, and you can sit there and you can read about these philosophers and you talk about them with them, and they're so smart, and and I think when they got to the sequels, and when the first one did so well, the studio was like, "Oh, just do whatever you want." So they were kind of like, "Okay, well, let's show how super smart we are." And I think they tried to make a really cerebral movie, but the ideas are really big, and some of them are point like the Frenchman, like that whole dialogue scene. It's just like,
please,
what?
And he's back for part 4, so that's good.
We don't need any.
No.
Now, I will say, I thought the idea that every few years, like the one was recycled, I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. But it is one of those things, like if you have to spend 10 minutes explaining the twist, then you've done a very poor job of setting that twist up.
I'm not here to say how a movie should have gone, but if you go on the Matrix premise of what they had, Neo being this anomaly that pops up, and basically a messiah, Paul Atreides, Luke Skywalker kind of hero that emerges, you don't have to get overly complicated with that. That storyline works very well to continue, and he could have then continued that, and he didn't have to be the fact that he was a quote recycled one, that he's one of many, diminishes his importance from the first movie. In fact, it neuters him immediately as an important character. All it shows is that he is one of countless that have appeared, and you're instantly taken back. Well, he's not that impressive. He's not that important. That story that they built up doesn't matter because it's happened before and it failed. And they didn't have to make it that way.
That's not an unfair criticism.
The last scene of the first movie, when he's walking very confidently in his nice trench coat and sunglasses into the phone booth, broadcasting his message, and then he takes off like Superman. Mm-hmm. The promise of that sequel was never fulfilled.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's a good example of how like sequels can hurt the movie, because in order to make 3 movies, the middle movie, he had to be torn down. You know what I mean? In order for the story to move forward, if that makes sense. It's sort of like the gripe you have with Rey in the first 2 Star Wars movies. It's like, gosh darn, man, she's like unstoppable. So that finally when they got to the third one, they had to like weaken her. You know, she had to reach a point where, you know, Kylo was about to really do her in.
Well,
and I think that's what the Matrix is, and building him up to that Superman level in the first one like that, knowing you're going to make 2 more movies, well, you've just written yourself into a corner.
Well, you're right. But, you know, having him end the Matrix as the, quote, Superman-esque kind of character in the Matrix world still doesn't put him in the human world. And that's where good writing and good characters could have taken that movie and really shown off the true depth of what the human side of this story was. And, you know, you had the Matrix side, you had the human side, and it just kind of they meshed it together. It got convoluted and overwritten, and too many ideas, and they got too important. And I have to say, the people should have won at the end. No peace treaty.
Yeah.
People should have won. I'm sorry. I can't walk away from that series going, I feel very good about this.
Well, you know, that's true, because you do expect like a giant liberation of all mankind, and they're basically saying like, well, some people will stay and some people will leave.
Yeah, I mean, what a cop-out. Give me a break.
Well, you know, they're making part 4, so who knows? Maybe.
You know it's going to be awesome. Because they've had such a great track record since The Matrix.
Well, that's why they're probably going back, because, you know.
Well, it's just one of them.
Well, you've got,
one of them's
well,
back.
you've got, you know, you have Keanu Reeves, so we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to write it off, but it's, at this point, I like the first one a lot, and I could take or leave whatever happens after.
Yeah, that's true. All right, now, mentioning Keanu Reeves, there's a movie that we were all kind of chatting about in the chain a few days ago. And, Mike, you talked about, like, a comedic sequel. How about Bill and Ted?
Oh, yeah. This is an instance where I think the sequel is superior to the original.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because I saw Bill and Ted in the theater, the first one, Excellent Adventure, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. I remember like really enjoying that movie, but I also don't think that movie ages well.
I haven't seen the first one in a long time.
But the second one is really good. It's really funny. It's actually really smart. There's a lot of smart jokes in that movie,
yeah.
and it's kind of fantastic. You know, when they're spirits and they're traveling around. The scene where Keanu Reeves possesses his dad. Oh my gosh,
I totally possessed my dad.
I totally believe you, Ted's dad.
And when they play air guitar, it's like a ukulele or something,
like a classic guitar.
Okay, dudes. I mean, fellow policemen. My son, Ted Theodore Logan, and his friend, Bill S. Preston, Esquire, have been murdered and replaced by evil robots from the future.
You totally did it, dude. I totally possessed my dad.
It's so funny, and it's clever, and the Grim Reaper, what's his name? Sadler?
William Sadler.
I mean, he steals the movie.
He's so good in that movie.
I mean,
he's so good. You want to play again? You're damn right.
You'll play
songs about Shep.
J7.
Hit. A hit. You have sunk my battleship.
Excellent! Yeah! I totally knew you put it in the J's, dude. Good thinking, Ted.
You must play me again.
What?
Best 2 out of 3.
No way!
The Grim Reaper is the best part of that movie.
And his foot comes out when they're playing Twister and grosses everybody out. But he can't beat them at those games. He's like,
an old mustard.
They're playing that crappy magnetic football. And he keeps them down there, and he keeps wanting to play over and over, and they're just getting exasperated. Oh, man.
3 out of 5?
Well,
5 out of 7?
Bill and Ted as characters, I think in general, they're just likable characters.
Yeah, they're not mean-spirited at all.
No, they're fun characters.
And it makes them very likable, and you cheer for them even though they're complete idiots.
Oh, they're total morons.
I like when they go talk to God. First, God, well done on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I mean, they congratulate God on his
I forgot
creation of
I forgot
Earth.
where they're up in.
And he goes, and all the planets, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and then they look at each other and do the guitar. What? And they're like, yeah, we got that one in.
But, and also you get to have the evil versions of them. We're totally going to kill you.
I know. I got a full-on robot chubby.
I hate them. I created them, and I even hate them.
Yes. Yeah. That part 2, and there was a great joke that I loved when I first saw it, especially where they show the scene from Star Trek, the arena where he's fighting the Gorn. And then, 5 minutes later, they're at the same.
They're on the same rock.
They're at the exact same rock, and they do the big camera pull and do the same angle and everything.
Yeah, that's great. It's great.
So yeah, Bill and Ted. I think you're right. The second one definitely improved on the first, and I'm looking forward to the third one. I think
it's the same writers as the other two, so hopefully,
yeah. And
Alex Winter
I'll see what Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter will do with them now.
I think it'll be fun.
Well,
I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
it's a nostalgia thing that is tickling that wants to be scratched right now.
Speaking of Keanu Reeves, another series of movies that either get better or sustains quality level are the John Wick movies.
I love John Wick. I got to see 3 though. I haven't seen 3.
3 is so good.
Yeah,
anyway,
3's crazy.
I'm gonna go watch 3 when we're done here.
But that's the example of a film. The first one, it starts, it sort of introduces you to the character, but part 2 just cracks everything wide open.
And it just sort of it takes the stuff they kind of subtly set up and they just run with it, and they just go nuts with all this stuff with the Continental, all the operators who put out the bounty, and then you bring in the high table, and it almost becomes like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
it's just so fantastic.
That's a series also that kind of speaks to me, and that I love that it picks up immediately from the previous one.
Well, this is what I was going to throw at Jared.
Yeah,
and I have to say this is probably a perfect example of a perfect sequel would be Back to the Future.
Yeah, so Back to the Future, that also, as you just said, that really when they actually reshot the scene, because
I sent that to you guys not long ago where they did the
comparison,
the split screen. That was amazing.
But they had Elizabeth Shue in place of the original Jennifer Claudia Wells.
Right.
But yeah, Back to the Future. Now I know Mike is not so high on part 2.
I think it's good. I think it's a little messy. I think there's a lot of. I think it's fun, but I think it gets back on course with. I think the third one's better than the second one. I think.
I like the second more than the third, but
I mean I enjoy all 3 of them. I think that Back to the Future. When it was originally released in the theaters, it said the end when the DeLorean goes into the future. The title card said the end. It was changed for the VHS release to be continued because they had decided that they were going to make a sequel.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
So they altered their movie before Lucas altered his.
Yes, you could say that. But Back to the Future series is probably one of my favorites.
That's a good example to bring up something they did in it that I don't like that they do in sequels.
Okay.
and you could tell when the movie was not written to be a sequel. Is in the second one they introduced that idea that Marty hates to be called a chicken.
Yes,
there is nothing in the first one that even comes close to that idea.
That's true,
and that's like the crux of that
paid off in the
the two movies.
Yeah, that's his Achilles heel. It's not set up at all in the first one.
It's not a deal breaker, but it is kind of like a little bit of a.
It stands out as very obvious.
Yes,
is what it does.
Yes,
yeah, because they've got the what's the matter, chicken, and then the music stings like ta-da.
What's wrong, McFly? Chicken? What did you call me, Griff? Chicken! McFly! No, buddy. He calls me chicken.
And he's like, "What you call me?" And so it's that part is a little strange, and that's something I did notice. The first time I saw part 2, I was like, "Wow." Actually, of course, I read the novelization before I saw the movie, but
what a shock.
But even I remember reading, thinking, "That's strange." I don't, Marty never really demonstrated that particular character trait before, but I thought Back to the Future Part 2 was fascinating in that it was the first sequel that I had seen that sort of actually went back into the first movie and played around within the first movie's events.
Right.
And so I thought that was, a lot of fun.
And that's the thing, too, that when you go back and watch the first one, you can kind of imagine all that stuff going on in the background. It doesn't really affect the first one at all.
No, I mean, I always think, like, he's trying to seduce his mom in the car, and he's all freaking out. And
you get the great wallet.
Oh, yeah. He just took that guy's wallet. Did he take that guy's wallet?
I think he took his wallet.
Well,
I think he took his wallet.
Hey, did you just take his wallet? He just took that guy's wallet. I think he took your wallet. I think he took his wallet.
And here's something that's just a total nerd thing from me. In the first movie, that scene ends when she goes, he goes, "Oh, you smoke too?" And she's like, "Marty, you're sounding just like my mother." And that's when the scene ends. But in part 2, the scene continues because Marty, the other Marty, is sort of sliding on the concrete directly under the window of the car. So the scene continues. And the dialogue that happens after that, they took from the novelization of the first movie.
Oh, really? That's
yes.
cool.
Like, that scene continues, and it continues just as it did in the novelization.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
They must have taken the novelization must have been based on the script, and that was actually something they didn't maybe they did shoot it. I don't know.
But, I thought, but for some reason, my nerdy 14-year-old self thought that was like the end-all, be-all of cool.
Did you feel like you were in on a secret?
Yeah, I was like,
I bet no one else knows
dude,
that.
I remember telling some of my friends at the time, and they're like, "Who cares? Who?" I was like, "But that's in the book of the first one." They're like, "There was a book?"
You nerd.
But yeah, I like the stuff in part 2 that happens when the stuff at the dance. It's all kind of like a jigsaw puzzle of like part 1 and part 2 together, because Biff's running around, he's just been knocked out, and he gets stopped by Mr. Strickland, and he's like, "Is that alcohol I smell, Tannen?"
Well, Mr. Tannen. How nice to see you here.
Why, Mr. Strickland, it's nice to see you, sir.
Is that liquor I smell, Tannen?
I wouldn't know. I don't know what liquor smells like because I'm too young to drink it.
I see.
So, but yeah, Back to the Future is a sequel that really played around with the stuff that I love about sequels. And part 3 definitely kind of slowed things down a little bit, but
kind of kept its own story going. Is what it was.
And I remember when part 2 ended, and part 3 sort of started the next day, the next morning at Doc's house. That was something else. I was just like, "Oh man, that's awesome!" This is the next morning, and the movies were released fairly close to within 6 months of each other.
They shot them concurrently. So
I saw part 3 before I saw part 2.
That's weird.
Which
but because the movie is kind of a standalone, you get past the first few minutes.
Well, yeah.
And you're just kind of, you could just like, jump in on the Old West stuff and then not even worry
Well,
about
yeah,
it.
because it turns into sort of a standalone adventure at the end. But yeah, that's a trilogy that I'm kind of happy that they've just kind of left that alone. And that's fine. Because
I'm going to switch gears on the sequels a little bit. And I'm going to talk about the kind of sequel that comes a little bit out of left field. And I'm going to use Temple of Doom as an example.
Okay.
Because coming off Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is my favorite movie of all time, they release the Temple of Doom. And as a kid, I had no idea that the Temple of Doom was set before Raiders of the Lost Ark because I wasn't smart enough to know the year of Raiders at the time.
I don't think anyone really picked up on that, to be honest.
So I was really, really confused when I first saw Temple of Doom as a kid about what the heck was going on. Where are all the people I knew from the first one? It was obviously I didn't realize it was set 3 years before.
But just a year before, I think.
But bold move to switch it up like that. Now it goes back. It tells a whole different side of Indiana Jones. It shows a slightly different side. So it's a great movie, great standalone movie. And as a whole, all three movies build a hell of a character. But it was almost like a movie that was built to be a serial movie. Like, here's the next episode of Indiana Jones versus here's a continuation of Indiana Jones.
What you're talking about is a movie like that a sequel where you're not really carrying over, because, all the Indiana Jones movies are standalone adventures.
For the most part, right.
Yeah, there's nothing, except for a few passing references, nothing really carries over between them. Except for, some of the side characters and stuff, and of course Indy, but that's a series of movies where you're working in the same world with the same character, but it's not really a sequel,
right?
And I think you could apply that to all of those movies. All right, so going along with kind of the Indiana Jones thing of the same guy, multiple movies, but not necessarily sequels, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, the James Bond series has been going for over 50 years.
Huge.
With pretty much the same family of producers behind it since Dr. No, back in 63, 62, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And those movies are not, they're not serialized at all, especially the early ones with Connery and Moore. I think as Mike has gotten into now on his rewatch, the Craig era, those movies, and I know you're still working on it. I'm not going to spoil anything, Mike, but starting with Casino Royale up into what they're doing with No Time to Die, the one that's not yet released. I think those movies are telling a story. They're not so standalone. And Mike, like I said, you'll see more. But, Quantum of Solace was the first direct sequel to a James Bond film in the series history, where it directly picks up and continues that story. And
I mean, before that, it really was just Spectre as a whole was the connector.
Well, Diamonds for Forever was kind of a sequel to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because Bond was on the hunt for Blofeld, although they didn't say specifically why. If you'd seen On Her Majesty's Secret Service, you knew why.
And in From Russia with Love, his girlfriend from Dr. No shows up in the first couple of scenes.
Yeah.
And that's really the only connective tissue there. But the Daniel Craig Bond movies, I think probably it's just sort of what the audience maybe demands these days. Those movies are telling a story. And you'll see that as you get into Skyfall and Spectre, kind of how that plays out. But we couldn't talk about sequels and not talk about James Bond. So
well, there's one that's run even longer than Bond. Godzilla. 1954. They're still making them.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay, well, someday...
We did talk about bad sequels, too, already, right? I'm kidding. Godzilla is your pet. I get it.
That's true. And one day we will have a whole episode where Mike can just go nuts and school
Could you imagine if they did a mashup, if they did like Godzilla and Swamp Thing in the same movie?
I don't know. Mike said...
We'd lose Mike to the stratosphere, man.
Yeah, we'd never see him again.
My gut says we should end by talking about almost a new evolution of sequels. And I'm going to look at the Marvel movies as something unique.
Yes, that's definitely... Yeah, they're definitely unique.
That is a new thing. It's
that people have tried to replicate and have failed miserably.
Although, to Jared's point, talking about in our horror episode in season 1, it had been done before. People really had noticed. But the Marvel movies really took sequels and connective tissue to a whole nother level.
Exactly.
Well, the Marvel movies felt like they were blueprinted out.
Yes, and I think to a large degree they were.
It's It's mind-boggling when you start to hear about little things that happened in like Iron Man the original that paid off.
Yeah,
10 movies later.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unbelievable.
But Captain Marvel is not a sequel to Iron Man, but there are story beats that connect the two of them across 19 movies.
Right.
And it is a unique beast in that way.
It's almost like you're putting together that quote, like you said earlier, a jigsaw puzzle, and all the little pieces touch everything else to make the big picture.
Yes. Iron Man is the first MCU movie. Ant-Man is not a sequel to Iron Man, but it's you kind of have to see it if you want to know what's going on in this 21 movie saga that they made. That the culmination of which, of course, was Endgame with the epilogue of Home or Far From Home.
Well, I think the thing about those movies is they all act as standalone films, but they all interlock into this series of films.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like, that seems impossible to do. You can watch each one of those movies by themselves and not feel like
you're missing something.
Right. I mean, you'll obviously you will be missing something, but it doesn't take away, it doesn't distract you from enjoying the movie.
Of course not.
But you can still, but then if you wanted to, you could sit there and watch all the movies, and you could watch the whole series of what they've made so far, and it'd be like you just watched
a hyper-dimensional
movie. 8
movie.
Seasons of a great TV show.
Yes. I mean, what they did is really what had only been done, appropriately enough, in comic books to that point.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they translated to these gigantic movies. And no one thought that was even possible. I mean, I remember hearing that Robert Downey Jr. was going to show up in The Incredible Hulk as Tony Stark, and I was like, holy crap, that's kind of blows my mind a little bit. And good grief, they pulled it off brilliantly.
They did. It's a true standalone masterpiece what they did, and they're still going to be pumping out movies, and I'll still go and see them. But that original first phase was historic in filmmaking and unbelievable. But the power of a sequel, huh? Pretty cool.
I feel like we've touched on the tip of the iceberg here. I feel like there's so much more we could visit, maybe in a later future episode.
Perhaps. Sure.
Well, I think this specific podcast should probably get its own sequel.
Well, I can't imagine we're done talking about sequels. So it probably, and there's so much we didn't talk about. I mean, we just touched on some of our favorites and kind of the qualities that made them good or bad sequels. But
that's true.
There's a lot of stuff that we could keep talking about and will.
Yes. Well, listen, season 2 is here, guys. We're back. And season 2 has a lot coming ahead. We've got some great guests. We're going to be talking about Clone Wars all season. We've got an amazing Indiana Jones deep dive retrospective. It's a can't-miss season. So every Monday, tune in. We've got a big one coming up next week, guys. We're going to be doing a retrospective rewind review where we watch a movie that we've either heard or never heard about, but never got to watch. And we got a winner coming up. I can feel it.
Roar! I don't think there was.
You got to tune in Monday. I really hope there's not, but I'm looking forward. Unlike in season 1, I'm looking forward to watching this. I've heard some great things. So tune in Monday for our retrospective rewind review of the movie Roar. Roar. Thanks for listening, everybody. As always, it's a bumpy road in the 25th century, but we're going to get you through it here on the Hyperspace.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.
I think I saw that.
Yes.
And they did some high resolution.
End of
and, you know, who the heck?
What the
I don't know. Mike derailed me.
All right, we can start that over. Man.
No, it's
Mike,
good. Keep going.
You're just talking over him. He can't even talk.
Not big much fake. No, I saw this. It's fake.
Well, you can edit me out. Just keep going.
He just took that guy's wallet.